Lily Thompson had always been fascinated by the rhythm and raw beauty of Brazil, the way it shimmered in photos with its golden beaches, endless music, and the kind of bold spirit that seemed to promise transformation. At 26, she'd finally saved enough from her marketing job in Seattle to make the journey on her own terms. No tour guides, no safety nets, just her instincts, a backpack, and an itinerary loosely built around impulse. Her friends had expressed concern, questioning the safety of traveling alone as a woman, especially in a place so unfamiliar, but Lily's mind was made up. She wanted adventure, a story worth telling, and maybe even something that would make her social media pop in a way it never had. The moment she stepped off the plane at Galeão International Airport, she felt a giddy rush of freedom that was almost intoxicating. Brazil smelled like salt, sugar, and mystery. She was enchanted. Her first few days were blissfully disorienting. She checked into a chic little hostel in Santa Teresa, a hillside neighborhood draped in cobblestone charm and colonial buildings painted in pastel shades. She filled her phone with pictures of street art, samba dancers, and the sweeping views from Sugarloaf Mountain. On Instagram, her posts began to pick up traction. People loved her wide-eyed wonder and the bright, chaotic beauty of the places she visited. She sipped fresh coconut water from beach stalls, took caipirinha selfies on Copacabana, and even tried hang gliding from Pedra Bonita, her scream of delight echoing across the cliffs. It was the dream, but beneath the surface of her perfect travel aesthetic, something quieter was at play. Strangers would sometimes stare too long. DMs from local men started flooding in. Most were harmless, flirtatious even, but a few were oddly persistent. Still, Lily paid little attention. After all, she was here to be free. At night, the city throbbed with sound, samba drums, laughter, and the far-off pulse of music from rooftops. One evening, she wandered through the famous Celeron Steps, marveling at the mosaic tiles as the sky turned purple overhead. She danced at impromptu parties that erupted in alleyways, and even found herself joining a group of Australian tourists who invited her to a beach bonfire. But while she played, others were watching. One night, as she returned to her hostel, she noticed someone following her from a distance. When she turned around, they vanished into the shadows. She laughed it off, brushing away the rising tension, chalking it up to her imagination or maybe too much wine. The warnings had always seemed like overkill. Headlines of missing tourists, whispered tales of corruption, organ trafficking, and tourists who vanished without a trace. Lily had read them all before boarding her flight, but dismissed them as urban legends or the sort of fear-mongering designed to keep women from living boldly. She was careful, she told herself. She kept pepper spray in her bag. She always told someone at home where she was going. But in a city as big and dizzying as Rio, even a careful person could become a ghost. On her 5th day, she posted a video dancing in front of the Christ the Redeemer statue, the sun catching the curve of her smile, captioned, "Alive in Brazil sparkles #solo travel #no regrets." That post would be her last one. By the time night fell, a storm rolled in, drenching the city in thick sheets of rain. Lily had made dinner reservations at a trendy bar in Lapa, the nightlife district famed for its colonial arches and chaotic charm. Dressed in a red sundress and sandals, she ducked beneath her umbrella, unaware that her decision to go out alone that night would be the start of something far darker than she could have ever imagined. As she slipped into a cab and gave the driver the address, a message popped up from an unknown number. "You look beautiful in red." She frowned, glanced behind her, but saw no one. When she tried to respond, the number had already been deleted. She arrived at the bar, shaken but determined not to let paranoia spoil her evening. Lapa was alive, humming with energy as usual, and the warm interior of the venue offered a comforting contrast to the storm outside. A live band played bossa nova, and Lily took a seat at the bar, ordering a passion fruit caipirinha. The bartender smiled and welcomed her in English, and for a moment, it felt like the universe was still on her side. But something shifted in the air. She didn't notice the man at the corner table watching her with sharp, unreadable eyes. He waited until she was halfway through her drink before standing up and making his move. The man's approach was smooth, practiced, and seemingly effortless. He moved through the crowd like he belonged in every space he entered, confidence radiating from his calm smile and poised posture. With dark hair, sun-kissed skin, and eyes that held just the right amount of mystery, he looked like someone who could easily be cast as the romantic lead in a telenovela. He introduced himself as Rafael, said he was from Sao Paulo but had lived in Rio for years, and complimented Lily on her pronunciation of caipirinha. His voice was soft but clear, accented and rhythmic in a way that made English sound like something richer, more exotic. At first, Lily was guarded. She turned away other men who had approached her in the past few days, most of them too forward, too fast. But Rafael was different. He didn't crowd her space. He didn't push. He simply talked, asked about her travels, her impressions of Brazil, her favorite moments so far. Within minutes, her shoulders relaxed. He spoke of hidden corners of Rio that most tourists never saw, places where the music felt like heartbeat and the food tasted like family recipes. He mentioned a local samba club a few blocks away, where his friends were performing that very night. Lily hesitated but found herself intrigued. The way Rafael described it, the club was more than just a venue. It was a living, breathing part of the city's soul. Against her better judgment, she accepted the invitation, finishing her drink and walking beside him under the umbrella of his casual charm. The streets were slick with rain, and the neon glow of Lapa reflected in puddles as they moved past street vendors. Groups of young people laughing under balconies, and couples dancing to music spilling from open doors. The club was tucked behind a nondescript doorway, marked only by a painted tile above the frame. Inside, it was a pocket of heat and movement. The air smelled of sweat, sugarcane alcohol, and percussion. A band played furiously in the corner, and dancers spun with joyful abandon. Rafael introduced Lily to several people, none of whom she could remember clearly later, and they welcomed her like an old friend. She danced, laughed, let go. Rafael was never far, offering her another drink, guiding her through the crowd, placing a hand gently on her lower back in moments that felt tender but also oddly calculated. At some point, Lily lost track of how many caipirinhas she'd had. The music had grown louder, the lights softer, the faces around her blurred, and even Rafael, once crisp and vivid in her mind, seemed to flicker like a flame in a breeze. She excused herself to the restroom, stumbling slightly as she pushed through the thick crowd. In the mirror, her reflection looked foreign. Eyes dilated, skin flushed, lips parted as if searching for air. Something was wrong. A slow, creeping sense of unease began crawling up her spine. She remembered ordering only one more drink after arriving. Why did she feel like she'd had 10? When she stepped back out into the room, Rafael was gone. The club, once vibrant, now felt claustrophobic. People danced too close. A man brushed against her arm, then another against her back. She pushed through the mass of bodies, trying to find the exit, but everything was spinning. Just as she reached the door, Rafael appeared again, this time holding her phone, saying she'd dropped it. He smiled in a way that no longer felt warm. "Let me get you some water," he said, his voice now sounding far away. She wanted to protest, but her legs weren't listening. Her thoughts were slipping like sand through her fingers. The last thing she remembered was him wrapping an arm around her and whispering, "Don't worry, I've got you," before everything went black. The next time her eyes fluttered open, she wasn't in the club. She was in a car, dark, humming, with the rhythm of tires on wet pavement droning in her ears. Rain tapped softly against the windows. She tried to lift her head, but her body refused. Her limbs were heavy, her thoughts scattered like broken glass. A figure sat beside her. She couldn't tell if it was Rafael or someone else. Her vision blurred and cleared in cycles, revealing moments like snapshots. A narrow hallway lined with green tiles, a stairwell, a door with a lock she didn't recognize. Then, nothing. Morning came like a slap. Lily jolted awake in a hotel room that wasn't hers. The light was too bright, the sheets scratchy, and the walls painted a dull beige. Her mouth was dry, and her body ached all over. She was fully clothed, except her shoes were gone. Her backpack was on the floor, partially unzipped. A cheap-looking digital clock blinked from the nightstand, flashing an incorrect time. She sat up slowly, dizziness washing over her. Her head throbbed. Panic flickered in her chest as she checked for her phone. Gone. Passport. Gone. Wallet. Still there, but half the cash was missing. For a moment, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had been a wild night, a blackout, a drunken stumble. But the lingering taste in her mouth, the sluggishness in her limbs, and the unfamiliar bruises told a different story. The window had bars over it. The door, when she tested it, was locked from the outside. Her heart pounded. This wasn't a hotel. This wasn't safe. She rushed to the bathroom and threw cold water on her face, gripping the edges of the sink until her knuckles turned white. And then she noticed it. A small puncture mark on her left arm, just above the elbow. Faint but deliberate. Not the kind from a scrape or bump. This was something else. A needle? Her breath quickened. Something had been done to her. Something she hadn't agreed to. Someone had planned this. She pressed her ear to the door, hearing nothing on the other side. Her mind raced, running through every story, every warning she'd read but dismissed. Her instincts screamed at her now. This wasn't just theft or a bad night out. It was bigger. She was being held, or at the very least, had been taken for something. She remembered the stories. Organ trafficking rings in South America, tourists disappearing, waking up missing more than their wallets. Her hands trembled. Raphael's face flashed through her mind, no longer charming but monstrous. And suddenly, as if triggered by the realization, a sound echoed outside the door. Footsteps, then silence, then the soft click of the lock sliding open. The door creaked open in agonizing slow motion, but no one stepped through. Lily's breath hitched in her throat as she pressed herself against the wall beside the frame, her fingers clutching the edge of a decorative lamp that she'd silently unscrewed earlier, the base now cold and heavy in her grip. The hallway beyond was dimly lit, shadows dancing against cracked plaster walls. After a full minute of stillness, she peeked out and saw that the hallway was empty. The door left ajar as if someone had exited in a hurry or wanted her to think they had. Adrenaline surged through her body, temporarily overriding the dizziness and aches as she stumbled barefoot down the hall, passing a broken mirror and a painting that looked water-damaged and unrecognizable. Her only thought was to get out, to find a street, a person, anything that didn't smell like mold and ammonia. At the end of the corridor, she found a narrow stairwell. She descended slowly, keeping her body low, her pulse roaring in her ears. On the second floor landing, she found an open window with rusted iron bars. Through it, she saw rooftops. Not the skyline of Rio, but a rundown neighborhood far from the city center. The walls were tagged with graffiti, and stray dogs barked in the distance. She didn't recognize this place. She didn't even know how long she'd been unconscious. She made it to the ground floor, ducked past a closed door with muffled voices inside, and darted through an open service exit that led her to an alley choked with trash. For a while, she just ran. Barefoot, disoriented, and half delirious. She ran until her legs gave out, and she collapsed behind a row of dumpsters near a cracked sidewalk. An old man walking past with a bag of groceries glanced at her warily and quickened his pace. No one stopped. No one asked. She was just another lost soul in a city that had seen too many. Eventually, she gathered enough strength to rise and staggered into the street. The sun had already begun its descent. How long had she been missing? Her heart sank with the realization this wasn't the same day. She found a pharmacy and begged to use their phone. The clerk, initially hesitant, relented after seeing her state. She called the emergency number listed in her travel guidebook, but language barriers turned the call into chaos. She asked for the American consulate, but they said the office was closed until morning. She gave the address she managed to read from the pharmacy receipt and waited outside, hiding in a doorway like a ghost of herself. When the police finally arrived, 2 officers stepped out of a dusty patrol car and approached cautiously. Lily tried to explain what happened, but her Portuguese was basic and their English was limited. She showed them the puncture mark on her arm, begged them to take her to a hospital. They exchanged glances and murmured something she couldn't understand. One officer took her statement with a tired expression while the other sat in the car, talking into a radio. Eventually, they drove her to a nearby clinic, not a major hospital but a small facility in a poorer district. There, a nurse examined her without asking too many questions. The doctor, a tired woman with sharp eyes, confirmed that Lily had likely been drugged and sedated, but there were no signs of lasting trauma, no injuries, no evidence of sexual assault. Lily asked them to check her organs, her kidneys. The doctor hesitated, then ordered an ultrasound. When the results came back, the doctor said her organs were intact, at least for now. That, at least for now, lingered in Lily's mind like a toxic whisper. She felt no relief, only a deeper sense of confusion. Afterward, the police took her to a station where she filed a report. A translator was brought in to help. She recounted everything: Raphael, the club, the drinks, the blackout, the strange room, the stitch mark. When she mentioned her missing passport and phone, the officer nodded slowly but didn't seem surprised. He wrote down possible abduction and robbery, but Lily saw no urgency in his manner. She asked if Raphael could be found. They said they would check security footage. She asked if they'd investigated this kind of thing before. The translator avoided her eyes. Sometimes, he said quietly. They gave her a voucher for a hostel on the edge of town and advised her to contact the U.S. Embassy in the morning. She left the station feeling more alone than ever. The hostel was a world away from the colorful boutique one she'd started in. Dingy walls, flickering lights, and a room that smelled like mildew. She lay on the bed, too afraid to sleep, too exhausted to stay awake. Her dreams came in fragments. Raphael's voice, the smell of the club, the flashing neon lights. She woke with a start, covered in sweat. It was still dark. She got up to use the bathroom and noticed something odd in the mirror. Her side felt sore, more than before. She pulled up her shirt and found something new. A thin line of stitches running beneath her ribs. Her knees buckled. She slid to the bathroom floor, gasping for air. The doctor hadn't found anything wrong. But now there was no denying it. Something had been done to her after that exam. This wasn't just a mugging. This was part of something organized, something clinical. The stitches were fresh, precise. She hadn't felt pain because she'd still been sedated. And now she knew she had been taken for something far more sinister. She wasn't just a victim of petty crime. She was a commodity. Morning came gray and slow, and with it, the sickening realization that she couldn't trust the police, the clinic, or anyone official. If her organs had been harvested or tampered with, and no one had stopped it, someone powerful was involved. Someone with access. She needed help, but not from authorities. She needed someone who believed her. She needed someone who already knew. With her last few reis, she bought a disposable phone and searched online for local journalists and independent investigators who had written about crime in Brazil. One name kept coming up: a man named Victor Moreira, an investigative journalist known for exposing trafficking rings and corruption. His last article had been a scathing report on the disappearance of foreign tourists in Brazil. She found an old blog with his contact details and sent him a desperate message. "My name is Lily. I think I'm one of the missing. Please help me." Then she waited. The reply came at dawn, just as Lily was beginning to doubt whether anyone would respond. Victor's message was brief but direct. "Meet me at Café Lucio, Avenida Gomez Freire. Noon. Don't bring anyone. Don't talk to police." Her hands trembled as she read it, not because she was afraid of him, but because someone finally seemed to understand what she was dealing with. She changed into the cleanest clothes she had, wrapped her stitched side with gauze from the hostel's tiny first aid box, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. The city was already buzzing when she reached the cafe. She took a corner seat, ordered nothing, and waited. At 12:03, a man walked in wearing dark sunglasses and a faded blue button-down. He moved with the cautious awareness of someone used to watching his back. He didn't ask her name. He simply sat down and said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning." Lily recounted everything. Her voice cracked at points, but she didn't hold back. Victor didn't interrupt. He just listened, occasionally jotting something down in a small notebook. When she finished, he leaned back, sighed, and said, "You're lucky to be alive." He then told her what he knew, how several foreign women had gone missing over the past 2 years, all while traveling alone. Most were written off as drug overdoses, runaway cases, or never investigated at all. 1 or 2 had reappeared with no memory, disoriented and confused. A few were never found. But the common thread was always the same: organ theft. It was a silent operation, run by a web of local fixers, corrupt doctors, and international buyers. Most victims never even knew what had been taken until it was too late. Victor suspected that Raphael wasn't just a predator but a recruiter, a hunter, someone who worked for a larger operation that specialized in identifying targets who wouldn't be missed right away. Solo travelers, those without family nearby, or people easy to discredit. The name Raphael wasn't real, of course. Men like him had a dozen identities. Victor showed Lily a grainy photo on his phone, taken from surveillance footage in Sao Paulo 2 years ago. Her stomach lurched. It was him. Same smirk, same posture. Different name. Victor warned her that they might try to finish what they started if they realized she'd survived. He offered to hide her, at least for a few days, while he looked into who had stitched her up and why they didn't take everything they intended to. Lily agreed. That night, they checked her into a tiny, out-of-the-way guest house under a fake name. Victor said he would visit her in the morning with updates. But at 2:47 a.m., Lily woke up to searing pain in her side. It wasn't just soreness, it was burning, pulsing, and growing worse by the minute. She stumbled to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and gasped. Her bandages were soaked in red blood. Her stitches had come undone. With a shaking hand, she unwrapped the gauze, revealing what looked like surgical damage deep beneath the skin. The cut wasn't clean anymore. It had festered. She started to cry but forced herself to think. She needed help, but she couldn't go back to a hospital. Whoever had done this to her had used sterile tools, but they hadn't closed her up properly. Maybe they'd been interrupted. Maybe they'd been rushing. Either way, if she didn't get treatment soon, she'd go septic. With no idea what else to do, she called Victor. No answer. She called again. Nothing. Desperate, she stumbled out into the hallway in search of help. But the guest house was quiet, dark. Her breath became ragged. Her vision blurred. She collapsed against the wall and slid down, her body giving out beneath her. When she opened her eyes, the world was different. Everything was cold. Her back ached, her skin was damp, and there was a dull ache in her side. Her senses slowly returned. She wasn't in a bed. She wasn't in a hallway. She was submerged in something, her body encased in freezing, clinking coldness. She looked down and screamed. She was lying in a bathtub filled with ice. Her clothes were soaked. Her lips blue, her fingers numb. She tried to move, but her muscles screamed in protest. On the tiled wall beside her, a piece of paper had been taped, bright white and horribly out of place. On it, in thick black ink, were just 4 words: "Don't move. Call 911. She shook uncontrollably, her mind splintering between logic and hysteria. She scanned the room, a cheap bathroom, the light flickering overhead. There was no window. The door was bolted shut from the outside. Her side throbbed worse than ever. She pressed her hand to the wound and found fresh gauze had been taped over it. Professionally. Her mind reeled. Someone had placed her here after the wound reopened. But why in ice? Then it hit her. The stories. The warnings. Ice was used to slow bleeding to preserve organs. But if that were the case, why was she still alive? Why had someone gone through the trouble of tending to her wound again? Unless there were disagreements in the network. Unless someone had helped her. She clawed her way out of the tub, her breath coming in frantic gasps. Her phone, or rather the burner she'd bought, was lying on the bathroom sink. Dry. Charged. Ready. A number was pre-dialed on the screen. With shaking fingers, she pressed call. It rang twice before Victor answered. His voice was low and urgent. "Don't say anything. Just listen. I found the clinic. The woman who patched you up wasn't in on it. She tried to save you, but they caught on. They're looking for you. You need to get out now. Lily tried to ask questions, but he cut her off. No time. There's a hatch in the back wall. Behind the sink cabinet. Crawlspace leads to the alley. I'll meet you there. Her hands moved instinctively, yanking at the vanity until it cracked loose, revealing a jagged opening just big enough for her to crawl through. She didn't think, just climbed in, dragging herself through the darkness, her body screaming in protest. Behind her, the sound of the bathroom door unlocking echoed like thunder. She didn't turn back. She crawled. She fought. She survived. Lily emerged from the crawlspace into an alley that reeked of sewage and rotting food. But to her, it was the scent of freedom. Her body was scraped, freezing, and trembling from exertion. But she didn't stop. She pressed herself against the alley wall, scanning the shadows for movement. A black sedan cruised slowly past the mouth of the alley, headlights sweeping the opposite side. She ducked, heart pounding. Moments later, a figure appeared at the far end, tall, broad-shouldered, walking with hurried precision. It was Victor. He motioned her toward him without a word and pulled her into a side street. They didn't speak until they were safely in his rented apartment, an unremarkable flat above a shuttered bookstore in an old colonial building. The walls were covered in pinned maps, blurry surveillance photos, and printed articles in both English and Portuguese. Victor locked the door behind them, drew the curtains, and helped her sit. He handed her a blanket, a protein bar, and a thermos of something warm. She barely chewed, just swallowed, shaking, while he rechecked the door and returned with a laptop. He opened a file labeled Suraya, Portuguese for mermaid, he explained, the code name given to the trafficking network he'd been tracking. The name mocked the romantic fantasy that lured so many women to Brazil in search of color, culture, and freedom, only to be captured by shadows. Victor began piecing together what had happened to Lily and how she had fit into their operation. She wasn't random. She had been chosen. Her social media, her solo travel status, her visibility as a foreigner. They'd flagged her as the perfect candidate. The network wasn't made up of brutes in basements. It was clean, precise, and professional. Doctors, corrupt clinic administrators, hackers, and brokers operated across multiple cities. Victor showed her photos of other victims, some who had gone missing in almost identical circumstances. An Australian nurse last seen at a beach party in Bahia. A Canadian woman who disappeared after a Tinder date in Recife. A Polish backpacker found days later, disoriented and stitched up in a favela clinic. Most never got answers. A few returned home with medical complications and no memory of what had been done to them. Lily's case was unique. She had been pulled out of the pipeline mid-process. Victor suspected that the doctor who stitched her had recognized what was happening and tried to intervene discreetly, which would explain why the operation had been incomplete and rushed. But someone had noticed. Someone had cleaned up the loose ends, placed her in that ice-filled bathtub, and likely planned to dispose of her once the procedure had failed. Victor had intercepted her just in time, and now she had something the network feared more than a missing organ, her memory. She had details, descriptions, locations, and names. She was a liability, and liabilities, Victor warned, were rarely allowed to walk free. He said the network had tentacles reaching deep into law enforcement and media. Even hospitals were compromised. That's why her previous checkup had reported nothing. They'd either been told to lie or had been too scared to tell the truth. Victor opened a new window on his computer, showing an encrypted chat feed with an anonymous whistleblower who claimed to have internal knowledge of the network. The messages were chilling. The user confirmed that Raphael, or whoever he truly was, had delivered multiple women to the same safe house Lily had described. There was mention of exports, coded language for international trafficking. The buyers were almost always foreign, wealthy elites in need of transplants that bypassed waitlists and legal constraints. The organs were flown out of the country using diplomatic channels or medical transport under fake credentials. Lily felt nausea rise in her throat as she realized how close she had come to being shipped in parts to someone who would never know her name. Victor said they had two choices. One, He could get her on a plane using forged documents and get her back to the US before anyone caught on. It would be risky but possible. 2. They could stay and fight. Gather evidence, leak the story, expose the network. Lily wanted to run. Every cell in her body screamed for escape. But then she remembered the feeling of helplessness in that tub of ice. The blank expression of the officer who filed her report like he was filing away trash. The look on the doctor's face when she examined her but said nothing. She thought of the other women, unseen, unheard, erased, and something hardened inside her. She looked Victor dead in the eyes and said, "Let's burn them to the ground." He nodded, already impressed by her resolve. The next few days blurred into a frantic investigation. They traced the medical supply shipments used to stock the clinic. They hacked into appointment records, uncovering aliases and payment patterns. Victor taught Lily how to use burner phones, how to encrypt files, how to disappear in plain sight. They moved constantly, one night in a fishing village, another in an abandoned church. Lily's body healed slowly, but her mind sharpened. She documented everything she could remember. She reviewed CCTV footage Victor had stolen from the Lapa bar and spotted herself dancing. Raphael behind her, always close. In one frame, he exchanged something with the bartender, a small vial, maybe. Victor managed to track down the doctor who had saved her, a woman named Dr. Almeida, who had since vanished from the clinic. But through a contact in a favela, they learned she was alive and in hiding. When they finally found her, she was terrified but willing to talk. Off the record, she confirmed everything. She had been forced to assist the network after her medical license had been threatened. But Lily's condition had shaken her. She'd stitched her up, knowing it was sloppy but hoping someone would intervene. Now, she passed them a USB drive with internal files, names, payments, patient logs. It was the proof they needed. But with it came risk. The network would come after them, no question. Victor had already been threatened before, but now they had crossed a line. They had evidence that could bring down not just criminals, but officials and medical professionals across 2 continents. It was now a matter of time. Lily felt a storm building around them, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She was furious. Victor warned that once they released the files, they couldn't turn back. Every name on that USB drive had power, real power. These weren't street-level thugs they were dealing with anymore, but politicians, customs officials, hospital executives, and international brokers who had built empires off the pain of the voiceless. Lily understood the stakes. She'd been the voiceless. She had felt the sterile coldness of a system that treated her like currency. She had seen the mirror's reflection of a woman who barely recognized herself, stitched together with fear and fury. And now the choice was simple. Either let them continue or stop them in a way that could never be ignored. They needed a plan not just to expose the ring, but to do so in a way that couldn't be buried, bought, or spun. Victor reached out to a few of his old contacts, exiled reporters, independent documentarians, and a former Interpol agent named Dario who had been forced into hiding after getting too close to a similar case in Colombia. Together, they formed an uneasy alliance united by one goal: make the truth undeniable. Lily's role wasn't just symbolic. She was the face, the survivor, the one who had lived to tell the tale. But more than that, she was bait. They knew the network would try to erase the evidence and anyone tied to it, starting with her. So, they decided to use that expectation to their advantage. The plan was dangerous. She would post a photo of herself on social media, deliberately using the same hashtags and tone as her early travel posts. It would look like she had resumed her vacation, carefree and unafraid. In reality, the location would be a decoy, a cafe wired with hidden cameras and equipped with a small security team recruited through Dario's contacts. Meanwhile, Victor would be broadcasting the contents of the USB drive through an encrypted live stream sent simultaneously to multiple international news outlets, whistleblower platforms, and human rights organizations. The night before the drop, Lily sat alone in the dark, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror above the sink. She traced the scar on her side. It had healed, but the memory never would. She thought of the other women, those who hadn't woken up in time, those who had disappeared into statistics and shadows. She was going to speak for them now, whether the world was ready or not. The morning of the plan, She wore a white dress, symbolic of peace, defiance, and purity reclaimed. She took the staged photo with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and captioned it, "Sun's out. Finally breathing again, #solo travel, #Brazilian vibes." Within minutes, the post began gathering likes, comments, and, more importantly, trackers. They knew the network would send someone to confirm. Lily sat at the table in the cafe for over 2 hours, sipping coffee she didn't taste, eyes scanning every face. At 11:17 a.m., a man in a gray jacket with mirrored sunglasses entered. He didn't order anything. He just stood by the wall watching her. Then came another man, younger, holding a bouquet of flowers, pretending to be a delivery guy. Victor's voice crackled softly in Lily's ear through the hidden earpiece. "We've got 2, possibly 3. Wait for my word." Lily kept her breathing even, hands folded on her lap beneath the table. At 11:22, the door creaked again, and Raphael walked in. His face was different, no longer warm or disarming, but cold, efficient, and irritated. He scanned the cafe and zeroed in on Lily with the detachment of a surgeon examining a cadaver. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on. He approached her table and, in flawless English, said, "Lily, I thought you'd gone home." She smiled and replied, "Funny, I thought you were in prison." Raphael's expression didn't change. Victor's voice came again. "They've all arrived. Go." Lily stood, slowly, deliberately. The cameras caught every angle as she looked Raphael in the eye and said loud enough for the room to hear, "This man drugged me, kidnapped me, and tried to steal my organs." There was a beat of silence, then chaos. The undercover team moved in, pinning the men before they could react. Raphael tried to run but was tackled halfway out the door. Civilians screamed, phones were whipped out, and within minutes the video went viral. At the same time, Victor's broadcast exploded across the internet. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, social media erupted, and hashtags demanding justice trended globally. By nightfall, the cafe sting had become front-page news. The footage of Lily's calm confrontation was replayed on major networks. Raphael's face was everywhere, his aliases exposed, and warrants issued across multiple countries. The USB drive's contents led to a series of raids coordinated by journalists and sympathetic insiders. Clinics were shut down, bank accounts frozen, officials suspended pending investigations. Lily didn't return home right away. There was still more work to do. But when she finally did board the plane weeks later, it wasn't as a victim. It was as a survivor, a whistleblower, and a symbol of resistance. The scar on her side never disappeared, and neither did the nightmares. But Lily turned her trauma into purpose. She partnered with organizations supporting trafficking survivors, testified before international human rights commissions, and started a foundation in memory of the women who hadn't made it. Every time she stood in front of a crowd and shared her story, she reminded the world that monsters don't just exist in forests or fairy tales. They walk among us in broad daylight, wearing smiles and tailored suits. But she also reminded them of something else. Monsters bleed. And when you expose them, they fall.